It usually begins in a moment so small you didn't mark it as important. A light still on somewhere in the house. A phone face down on the table. The ceiling above your bed carrying faint shadows from passing cars. It's late enough that the world has gone quiet, but your mind hasn't followed. You tell yourself you'll think about it tomorrow. You tell yourself this is the last thought. But the thought doesn't end. It branches. One memory pulls another. One question opens 10 more. And there you are, staring into the dark, aware of every breath, every sound, every unfinished sentence inside your own head. At the time, you don't call it overthinking. You call it being responsible, being aware, being prepared. You don't realize you're slowly learning how to never rest. Somewhere along the way, something shifted. Maybe it happened when you were young, standing in a room where the air felt unpredictable, where moods changed without warning, where silence felt safer than asking questions. Or maybe it happened later, after a moment of embarrassment, failure, or loss. After you learned that one wrong move could echo longer than you expected. There was a quiet internal conclusion, not spoken aloud, not even fully conscious. If you think far enough ahead, you won't be surprised. If you replay what you said, you can correct it next time. If you analyze every outcome, you might avoid pain. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was strategy. A belief formed gently, almost lovingly. Vigilance equals safety. So you adapted, invisibly. You became someone who scans conversations for hidden meanings, who replays interactions long after they're over, who prepares for futures that may never arrive. Your mind learned to stay awake because staying awake once mattered. It meant noticing when something was off. It meant catching the shift in tone, the tightening of a jaw, the silence that carried more weight than words. It meant protecting yourself, or someone else, from consequences you didn't have the power to control. This constant thinking wasn't a flaw. It was intelligence shaped by necessity. It was your nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do to keep you safe, connected, and intact. At first, it even helped. You were the one who anticipated problems before they happened. The one who noticed patterns others missed. You were careful with words, careful with timing, careful with people. You learned how to manage yourself in a world that didn't always feel manageable. Overthinking made you adaptable. It made you perceptive. It made you feel useful. And so the habit stayed, long after the original danger softened or disappeared. The mind doesn't easily let go of what once worked. It keeps sharpening the same tool, even when the environment has changed. But slowly, quietly, the cost began to surface. Not all at once, not dramatically, just in the background of your days. Rest stopped feeling restorative. Sleep became shallow, interrupted by thoughts that refused to wait until morning. Joy started to feel fragile, as if it could be interrupted at any moment by the next thing you needed to worry about. Even peaceful moments carried an edge-on undercurrent of anticipation, as though calm was only temporary, and vigilance was the price of keeping it. You might have noticed that your body was always a little tense, even when nothing was wrong. That your mind was always slightly ahead of the present, rehearsing, reviewing, bracing. In relationships, overthinking wore a careful mask. You listened deeply, but you also doubted what you heard. You cared intensely, but you questioned whether you were too much or not enough. You analyzed texts, pauses, changes in energy. You wondered what you missed, what you misread, what you should have done differently. Intimacy felt close, but never fully safe, because your mind was always standing just outside the moment, watching. Trust became something you wanted, but struggled to inhabit. You could imagine closeness, but surrendering to it felt like stepping into the dark without a map. At work, the same pattern followed you. You prepared more than necessary, revised more than required, carried the weight of responsibility long after it should have been shared. Mistakes felt personal. Feedback lingered longer than it needed to. Success brought brief relief, quickly replaced by the next thing to anticipate. You measured your worth by how well you could stay ahead, how much you could manage, how little you needed from others. Slowing down felt irresponsible. Rest felt earned, never given. And so you stayed mentally alert, even when your body was exhausted. Emotionally, you learned to regulate by thinking rather than feeling. When something hurt, you analyzed it. When something frightened you, you planned around it. When something overwhelmed you, you tried to understand it, instead of experiencing it. This wasn't avoidance. It was adaptation. Thinking gave you a sense of control, where feeling once felt dangerous or uncontained. But over time, this distance from your emotions came with a subtle grief. You could explain what you felt better than you could feel it. You could describe your inner world, but you struggled to rest inside it. Psychologically, what you call overthinking is often a nervous system stuck in readiness. A mind shaped by earlier unpredictability learns to stay alert, because alertness once meant survival. Attachment experiences taught you quietly whether the world was reliable or conditional. Conditioning reinforced the idea that outcomes depended on your vigilance. Ego defenses formed not to block life, but to help you navigate it. Your mind became the place where meaning was made, danger was anticipated, and safety was negotiated. The problem was never that you thought too much. The problem was that your thinking never got to stand down. There comes a moment sometimes in the middle of another sleepless night, sometimes in the aftermath of a conversation you can't stop replaying when something shifts again. Not into panic, not into clarity, just into recognition. You'll notice that the same pattern that once kept you safe is now keeping you tense. That the constant analysis is no longer preventing pain, only extending it. That your mind is working overtime to protect a version of you that no longer exists in the same way. And for the first time, the question isn't how to stop thinking, but why you're still needing to. This realization isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with solutions. It arrives with sadness, with compassion, with a quiet respect for the part of you that learned to survive by staying awake. You see how young that part is, how loyal, how tired. You begin to understand that overthinking isn't the enemy, it's a signal of a system that learned safety through anticipation, and hasn't yet learned that rest is allowed now. Nothing is fixed in this moment. You don't suddenly sleep through the night. Your thoughts don't magically slow. But something changes in how you relate to them. Instead of arguing with your mind, you start listening to it. Instead of criticizing yourself for spiraling, you notice what the spiral is trying to protect. You witness the pattern without shaming it. You name it without trying to erase it. And that naming, gentle and honest, creates a small pocket of space where compassion can exist. Over time, slowly, unevenly, you notice subtle shifts. The thoughts still come, but they don't all demand your attention. Some pass without being interrogated. Some lose their urgency when you recognize them as echoes rather than threats. You begin to feel moments of quiet, not as something to fill, but as something to inhabit. Your body learns, inch by inch, that it doesn't have to stay braced all the time. That safety isn't only something you think your way into. Integration doesn't look like peace all the time. It looks like allowing yourself to be human without constant monitoring. It looks like letting a feeling move through you without immediately translating it into a problem to solve. It looks like trusting that you can respond to life as it happens, not only as you imagine it might. The mind still works, but it no longer carries the entire burden of keeping you intact. And maybe, one night, you're awake at 3 a.m. again. The room is quiet. The ceiling is the same. But something is different. The thoughts are there, but they're softer, less urgent. You don't chase them as far. You don't demand that they resolve before you rest. You let them exist without proving anything. You let yourself be here, unfinished, unprepared, alive. This is not a victory. It's a permission. Permission to rest without earning it. Permission to feel without analyzing. Permission to trust that you don't need to think your way into being whole. You already are, even in the dark, even in the quiet, even when your mind hasn't fully learned how to be still yet.